We're very fortunate to have with us today the regional head of the FBI, Special Agent in Charge, Todd Wickerham, and I have the honor of introducing him because I just graduated from the FBI Citizens Academy, which is a wonderful opportunity to really understand the incredible, complex work that the FBI does and how they work with local law enforcement and on both local, national, and international matters. And SAC Wickerham outdid himself by making himself available almost every week, unless he was in DC, which was not his favorite thing. He was much happier being in town, and if he was in town, he always made sure to greet us and be with us, which was incredible. You'll find him not only knowledgeable from his 20 years of very broad experience with the FBI, but also very accessible and candid. So we're very fortunate to have him as our really chief law enforcement leader for our region. Coincidentally enough, he started his career in Pittsburgh, where he had a very broad variety of responsibilities, including having served on the SWAT team and the bomb team. At 9/11, he was involved in the investigation of the United Airlines flight that crashed near Pittsburgh. And he's been a very committed leader in terms of concern about terrorism and violence in general, but especially about violence against faith-based and other communities. And we're very fortunate to have him. I want to thank all of you for making this a priority. So early in the morning, right before the holidays, the response to this event was overwhelming and unprecedented. I can't tell you how many emails I got from presidents of congregations who said, I'll be out of town, can another officer substitute for me? And everyone wanted to make sure they were represented here, and that's both encouraging because we need to have the best information and be the most prepared, and also sad that this has become such a huge priority for us, but absolutely necessary. So without any other further ado, I want to welcome Special Agent in Charge Wickerham.
It is an incredible honor to be here with you today. And just seeing the different faces in the crowd and the uniforms sprinkled in with the crowd, and this is how we defeat this threat, right? It's through knowing each other, it's through personal connectivity, getting together to talk about these tough issues. These issues are incredibly evolving as we speak, right? I'll talk about some of what over even the past 2 weeks, the FBI, along with its partners, always with our partners, have done to address these incredible threats of violence that are going on around our country, including just up the road a month ago in Dayton, to try to understand what we can do about these things together and how we're going to deal with these issues together. And certainly understanding why, or trying to understand why people are so motivated by hate, what gets somebody to the point where they're going to commit an act of violence, not only against a person, but against a community. So again, thank you, Shep, for the kind introduction. I am incredibly lucky to be here. I am from Columbus, so to come home to Southern Ohio in this role has just been the greatest honor that I could have in my career. We know we are not great at understanding this threat and that threat of violence towards religious communities, because we just have not done a good job over the years of collecting data and stats, right? Like, we need to understand where to look and how prolific the threat is by understanding what it is and seeing the numbers and seeing how things evolve. The previous system, and the FBI runs the system, that collected stats regarding hate and bias-based crimes, how it functioned was that the highest level of crime took precedence. So if it's a homicide that was driven by hate, it was just simply reported as a homicide. And I say that because we're making significant changes with that. There's a new incident-based reporting system that will do a much better job of collecting stats here in the next year that's going to come online. And I say that because 87% of jurisdictions last year in our country reported 0 crimes of bias or hate, and we just know that that's not correct. We know that these numbers are going up, and I'll talk a little bit about the things that why these numbers unfortunately are going up. So we are working towards correcting that, to getting better data. So again, so we need to share that data with our partners, whether that is our faith-based partners, whether it's our state and local law enforcement partners that we do everything with. Rarely does an FBI agent go out on their own and do anything. It's always in collaboration, coordination with our partners. And the reason that is it's very, very clear. You know, our local partners, they know their communities, they know these organizations, they are out on the street every day talking to people, meeting with people, protecting people, and we are just not that big, right? We are spread very, very thin with what we do, and so we rely heavily on those partners, especially to address these threats of violence against people in communities. You know, we know in our country it's a fundamental right to be able to worship as one sees fit, and that right to be able to do that is being impacted routinely. You know, from Pittsburgh to Poway, we have seen attacks on the Jewish community over the last year that are devastating, not only obviously to the individuals who are injured or lose their lives, but you know, but for anybody to have fear to be able to go to their religious institution of their choice to worship as they see fit. You know, it's just an encroachment on what our country is, and so we are doing everything that we can to do to address this. We have seen this in our community here in Cincinnati, and we had a conviction last year of an individual named Ismail Coach who attacked somebody simply because he thought he was Jewish. The individual that he attacked was not Jewish. It was somebody who was so offended by Ismail Coach's yelling about who's a Jew here, I'm going to kill you. This individual stood up and said, I'm a Jew, what are you going to do about it? And then was attacked. We convicted him in federal court of that. He recently was sentenced. Unfortunately, he has not shown up. The judge allowed him to self-report. Nothing against the judge. He had cooperated throughout the trial and showed up. So there's no indication he was going to flee, but he has fled. He is out there. Do we think he is going to commit any attack on a Jewish institution? We have no information on that, but again, we're going to take these threats seriously. We're going to track him down, but also a really important part of that, and I would give Shep, who gave me an incredibly nice introduction, but I want to talk about him a little bit. He came into court on the day of the sentencing and talked about the impact that not only this attack had on the victim, but on the Jewish community here in the greater Cincinnati area. And I believe his words, his strong words, showing how that violence impacted this community, had a very strong influence on the judge, which resulted in this individual getting a prison sentence that we weren't sure that he was going to get. So we appreciate that great support. How we look at these threats, they tend to combine. Whether they're really combined, it depends on the individual act, but domestic terrorism and hate crimes are very concerning to us because we just see this pathway, this movement towards violence is so quick. How we used to look at these types of threats is an individual would have an ideology, they would, whatever would form in their brain, their ideologies, these hate-filled ideologies, but they would move kind of along a spectrum until eventually very few of them would pick up some type of weapon or commit some type of assault. What we're seeing now is individuals who really want to do killings, they want to commit violence.
Sorry, everybody, there's a little static in the back.
Oh, sure.
Do you want to do it closer?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, whatever. Better. Sorry about that. So we see these individuals that are incredibly driven to do violence, and I'll talk in a minute about why we think that's the case or what is driving them to do that. And then they kind of pick up ideologies at the end, and it's complex, but what it makes is them very difficult to find. And again, I'll hit on this in a minute. How do we find those working together? How do we find these individuals to try to off-ramp them, to get them, to find them, and whether it's getting them some mental health help, or whether it's arresting them for something prior to an attack, but it makes it very, very difficult. Most of these people that we see, they are not radicalizing, they are not being driven to commit this violence in person. They are online, they are typically by themselves, they're in the, it's not hard to find the deepest, darkest, most hate-filled things on the internet, simply in your home. So they're individuals that we sometimes have never come up on the radar before, they've never been arrested before, but they are developing this strong wanting to do violence, and being fueled by individuals that they find online. Yeah, they call themselves group. Typically, they never get together. They never meet. Again, these things just make it really, really difficult to detect. What we used to look at is when we had the 9/11 and that great threat of terrorist attacks against countries, against people, against organizations. We developed a great system to be able to try to vet those out, right? Money being transferred overseas, communications occurring between individuals that we could get in front of, we could intercept, and that's just not happening as much anymore. These individuals are, again, by themselves radicalizing, this bottom up that is such a great concern to us. So, but again, working together as a community to communicate these signs, these indicators that will help keep you safe is what we really want to do. I cannot stand up here and not talk a little bit about, because it's impactful and it's meaningful to this crowd, as to what we saw in the Dayton mass shooting investigation, not targeted towards a religious institution, yet maybe could have been. This individual has wanted to do violence for years, talked about it, wrote about it, and made preparations for this attack for years, right? You know, it's very public that he had a rape kill list when he was in high school, and caused him to get thrown out of high school for a few months. He was back in high school, but a very disturbed individual who at the very end, about a year before he committed the attack last month, started looking at kind of ideologies, anti-government type of ideologies, anti-fascist ideologies. Again, but it was just we look at this as, we don't believe he did that attack because of that. It's somebody who's trying to put a greater name to themselves, to connect to some type of what they see as a greater cause. All of this, his radicalization, all of his violent ideologies, and I say ideologies, I got grief for saying, rather than saying domestic terrorism, because we're not sure what it is yet, I got a little bit of grief for saying violent ideologies at a press conference related to that shooting. But that's exactly what it is. Like, it wouldn't have mattered what he found. He was going to commit this mass killing, and he was going to attack at some point. And so what he ended up finding was a little bit of domestic terrorism type of thing sprinkled in at the end. But what drove him all along that way was this great desire to do mass violence against his community. And again, he wrote about it, he talked about it, but very difficult to get in front of that. So what we do understand with these attacks now, and kind of the key to this, is being connected to the community. In all of these attacks, we know that there's what we call bystanders, individuals within their lives that understand that something is not right. They may not recognize, they may not realize that an attack is going to occur at a specific time or against a specific group or against a specific institution, but they recognize that something has changed dramatically. And it's really, really easy, right? We're all trained, if you're at the airport and you see a bag that's unattended, you're going to call somebody and somebody's going to take care of that bag. It's already been through an x-ray machine, right? We have this ingrained in our culture. This is what we do. This is what we understand and how we're supposed to act. It is very, very, very difficult to make that call to an authority when you see your child going down that path. And so how do we do that? How do we convince people within our communities that even if it's a member of your community you've known your whole life, that you see them going down a bad path, right? They're talking about things, they're doing unusual things, they're purchasing firearms, they're having other people purchase firearms for them because they don't want people to know that they're purchasing firearms, right? Things that should make your radar go up. How do you talk a parent? How do you talk a best friend? How do you talk a member of a religious community into coming forward to somebody, right? Even mental, health providers, may not be enough, but coming forward to law enforcement of some type, or some type of person in authority that can try to intercept this person, get in front of them, get them the help that they need, take the firearms away that they have, whatever that is, to get in front of that is now our great challenge. We see these great spikes in this, like our tip line pops up after 9/11. We got tons of calls of people concerned about people, but we know that we will see that those numbers go back downhill again as people, they get desensitized to this. But this threat is incredibly out there. You have probably heard about the threat up in Youngstown, where an individual posted a video online threatening a synagogue in the Youngstown area with our local partners, our great local partners up there. they got in front of that threat. They arrested that individual for the online threat. I know we're very aggressive now with charging these types of things. That individual had been in Charlottesville when the attack occurred last year, so something bad was going to happen. That happened here in Ohio, up in Youngstown. I was just at a Joint Terrorism Task Force conference with our local partners over the past couple days. We've intercepted 70 of those threats in the past week alone. So individuals where people saw movement towards radicalization, movement towards some type of significant act of violence, and somebody has called, somebody has interacted, somebody has reported that, and we just see that trend continuing on. You know, we and these individuals, again, you know, their ideologies don't match. You know, they go from being an ISIS supporter to being a white supremacist in a week, and then the Parkland shooter down in Florida had multiple ideologies that he switched to over the course of the year, where he was purchasing firearms and getting ready, or eventually to do that horrific attack on that high school down there, switching ideology. So again, but that opens up different opportunities for different people to report and intercept him. You know, we as a community and the FBI missed on the Parkland shooter. It's very, very public. We got a very credible call and did not do with it what we were supposed to about him. You know, where we need to make sure that when we get any type of tip that we're acting on it, but we're acting on it in concert with the community, right? You know, if it's a threat against this institution here, we would immediately call and let them know that there's a threat against them. Immediately work with our local partners, let them know about the threat, and then work together to mitigate that. But again, it's a great shift for us. We are much more, we try to be proactive in stopping threats, but our agents don't typically go knock on doors and run around, you know, 24/7 stopping threats like that. That's what we do now with our partners, because this has become such a significant threat. So again, you know, our goal is very, very clear, right? Like, we need to stop these attacks, whether it's an individual attack or onto some type of institution, and we're using every single tool we can, whether it's taking a firearm away, whether it is forcing somebody with our local partners into getting a mental evaluation, and sharing that threat intelligence with everybody we can to stop these attacks. But again, your attention here and your being here today to see what you can do your part is really important. Some other things, and again, these are, you know, things that I personally believe in, but I think it's very important that the communities like this put lots of pressure on these social media companies. It is very difficult as a government agency to put pressure. You know, it's First Amendment protected speech. The movement from spewing hate to committing a crime happens very, very quickly, and we know there's lots of hate out there. Well, these companies, they have a problem if these hateful messages, if these types of threats are within their systems. And as we as a community and individual, as parents, need to put pressure on these social media companies in every way we can to force them to cooperate. They have come a long way, but there's still a long way to go in terms of them having the resources, having the technical mechanisms to identify threats and hate within their system, and to share those immediately so somebody can make sure that they're getting in front of any type of threat. So, you know, I encourage you at any opportunity that you have, whether it is talking within the other groups you're part of in the community, whether it's talking to your children. My poor kids have been hit over the head with this type of stuff forever. You know, in terms of, you know, this stuff is not good for you, it's not good for your brain, there's really horrible stuff out there online. But also, you know, if we can go after, again, as a community, you know, these people that are making money by having hateful things, by having threatening things on their system, I think that's much more impactful as a community than what we can do as the government. Recognizing the need, you know, within our local communities to put more resources and money into mental health care and prevention. You know, it is a great crisis. I've heard this over and over and over throughout my career, is that we tend to jail our people with the greatest mental health issues rather than treat them, because the resources are just not there to treat them. Again, I think this horrendous opioid epidemic has brought attention to that and how important a treatment role plays in all of these things. But I think that's a really important thing, to be aware of the resources of the community to help folks who may be going down the wrong path. And then, a common sense look at firearms, right? So, my job is to walk off the stage and not have you identify like what my personal political leanings are, but 100-round magazines do not belong in our streets. It's just, that ability of the Dayton shooter to go down that sidewalk and continue shooting is incredibly troubling. So just a little personal thing for me, but I do believe that it's made it very difficult to kill lots of people very quickly. And but again, continuing to support our local police too. So I'll flip that on the Dayton. If not for those Dayton police officers, those heroes, it's much worse that night. To see an individual armed with nothing but a pistol running at full speed towards somebody with a rifle coming down the street, risking their own lives. Those guys were heroes. They eliminated that threat within 34 seconds. Unbelievable attitude and training and ability to deal with that threat out there. So I can't come off here without recognizing those folks. And again, I do think it's really, really important too that, folks that have the same concerns, regardless of what your faith is, that you're sharing information, you're sharing best practices, you're sharing intelligence about those threats. Again, these people that want to do harm, they may want to do harm to the Jewish community one day, and then it's the Muslim community the next day. So anything that we can do to open up those lines of intelligence sharing, of information sharing amongst communities of faith is very, very important. Brad and I worked together in Pittsburgh many years ago, and Jim Hartnett, who I think was one of the really folks pushing security within the Jewish faith community up in Cleveland. Having these individuals who understand how these things work and how to share information and intelligence regardless of who is the target, I think has been a great addition for the Jewish community across the country. And the more we can build on that together, then the safer I think we will all be. So, look, I don't mean to be doom and gloom. The threat out there is really concerning nowadays. We are all together trying to get in front of it. But recognizing that people do target the Jewish faith and they do target institutions like that is really the first step in dealing with that. And so I appreciate, I have great partnerships within this community throughout Cincinnati and up in Columbus, and we appreciate the great enthusiasm that communities of faith bring to the FBI to try to help us do our mission, and we couldn't do it without them. So I will stop there on talking, but I'm open to any questions that anybody has before Brad gets started on his presentation.
Knowing that this is a very inquisitive group, and rightfully so on security matters, we're going to hold off questions until after Brad speaks, and then we'll have SAC Wickerham also come back up, and you can ask your questions then. We just want to make sure that everybody's, we get to the meat of the program, and you guys all have busy schedules, so we appreciate it. Thank you very much. So do hold your questions. We do want to have them answered. We just want to get to Brad. But I'm going to say a few words really quickly first. Thanks to the Federation, our parent company, for helping us organize this and everybody involved in the Federation. Thank you to the JCRC and Jackie Congito, my partner, for helping put us on. Thanks to all of you for showing up. All of our security partners, we really appreciate it shows your commitment to security. You all have a mission to do in your own organizations. We know that security is part of it, and we appreciate you spending a good part of your day to come here and share security issues with us. Especially, this is the anniversary, I believe, of the Fifth Third Bank shooting.
That's correct.
So I do want to have a special shout out to our law enforcement partners. Amberley Village, Chief Wallace and his crew, J.D. Drake out there, they take good care of us on a daily basis. We have our Gulf Manor partners, our Blue Ash partners, the chiefs and lieutenants. University of Cincinnati Police, the director here is here, and the Cincinnati PD captain from District 1. I hope I'm not missing anybody, because we can't do our job without the law enforcement partners doing theirs. We rely on them heavily, so we appreciate them being here. Just a note real quick. About the Dayton shooting. So we just had the Dayton shooting, we just had the Fifth Third shooting. People around here, I hear it from time to time, and I hope I don't cringe too much. Actually, I don't care, because some people say it's not going to happen here in Cincinnati. It has happened in Cincinnati. It has happened in Dayton. Squirrel Hill, Overland Park, which one am I forgetting? Oak Creek. There are all, we don't want Amberley Village or Blue Ash or Gulf Manor to add to that list. And the way we prevent our names, our city names, from becoming part of that list is doing what we're doing here with Brad and with SAC Wickerham, and all of you joining in to help continually keeping security on your mind, continue to observe what's going on around you, and report what you see. To make it just even a little bit more personal, my daughter actually, she's a musical theater major, and she did a play with the shooter in Dayton, his sister who he killed, and the best friend who he shot who's still in the hospital. So it was very close to our home. My son was in that bar where the shooting was the weekend before. So if you think that this stuff is not close to you or around you, you hear SAC Wickerham say, 70 cases just recently in this area. We've been preaching forever. The threat is all around us. It is here. It is existential. And if we don't look out for it, then we're going to be victims too. And I think we do a very good job here of looking out for it and looking out for each other, but we have to remain vigilant. We don't want to scare you into doing what you're supposed to be doing. Look at all our brothers and sisters over in Israel. They live through this all the time. They live their normal, natural lives. We want you to be on heightened awareness, but not afraid. We want to get out there and show people what the Jewish community is about. But we also want to be smart about doing it and protect ourselves as we go. So thank you to all of our security partners for doing that, and our law enforcement partners for doing what they do. So